So how can one legal case be described in two completely opposite ways? How can a defense be called both logical and sound and, at the same time, frivolous, unreasonable, and without foundation? I mean, it sounds impossible, right? But that exact contradiction is right at the heart of one homeowner's unbelievable fight to save his house. Let's get into it.
Now, this is a pretty remarkable statement. And get this isn't from some friend or supporter. This is from Ken Nagy, an experienced attorney for the opposing side, on the official court record. He's admitting that the arguments from homeowner Jeremy Bass had real substance, they were logical, and they were sound. Burn that phrase into your memory.
But then you have this. The district court's final word on those very same arguments. It's a complete 180. The court didn't just disagree. It ruled that the defense was so utterly baseless that it was basically punishable. So which one is it? A logical argument or a frivolous defense? To get to the bottom of that, you have to understand the man at the center of this whole mess.
This is Jeremy Bass, a homeowner who found himself in a legal battle that you just wouldn't wish on anyone. To save the home he'd lived in for 20 years, he had to represent himself. But, and this is key, it was absolutely not by choice. His situation actually has a specific legal term, and you really need to understand it to grasp what happened here.
Bass was what's known as perforce pro se. This isn't some guy who just decides, hey, I'll save a few bucks and represent myself. Nope. This is someone who tried to hire over 125 different law firms and was turned away by every single one, often because of conflicts of interest. He was forced to go it alone in the incredibly complex world of litigation.
Okay, so let's get into the evidence, because this is where things get really wild. Let's look at the single most jaw-dropping piece of evidence that Bass brought to the table. Something that seems to just defy all logic and statistics.
So look at this number, $165,346.71. This was the exact, to-the-penny winning bid at the foreclosure auction for Bass's home. But here's the absolute kicker. The buyer showed up with a cashier's check, already printed out with this exact amount, before the auction was even over. How is that even possible? How could they know the final price down to the last cent?
So for Bass, this was the smoking gun. Clear evidence of collusion, that the buyer had inside info, that the price was fixed before the public auction even really happened. But the court? Nah. They just waved it away, calling it a not uncommon procedure. And this perfectly captures the entire conflict. Was this a rigged sale, or just business as usual? Bass's attempt to prove his side ran smack into a wall. But it wasn't a wall of evidence, it was a wall of procedure.
You see, this is the really frustrating part. The fight for Bass's home wasn't won or lost on the facts, like that crazy check. It was decided in this procedural maze, where the rules themselves were turned into the very weapon used against him.
This is a classic catch-22, a procedural trap. It's maddening. To prove there was collusion, Bass needed his opponent's internal communications, emails, records. The only way you can get that stuff is through a legal process called discovery. But the court denied his right to discovery, and then it turned around and dismissed his claim because he didn't have any evidence. He was trapped. There was no way out.
And it just kept happening. It wasn't just the discovery process. The court just systematically built this wall to keep his evidence out. When the other side introduced new arguments at the very last second, Bass's response was just poof, struck from the record. Again and again, the door to justice was slammed shut before he could even make his case.
And this is just unbelievable. How did the court justify throwing everything out so quickly? Well, the presiding judge actually admitted on the record that she'd only given the documents a cursory look and hadn't had time to read them in depth. Think about that. Life-altering judgments that would cost a man his home of 2 decades were being made without even fully reading the paperwork.
So as if all that wasn't enough, when the case went to the appeals court, things got personal. The court started to shift its focus. It wasn't just about the arguments anymore. It became a direct and personal attack on the quality of Bass's work, trying to completely discredit him. The appeals court threw out this really wild accusation that Bass's highly detailed legal research looked like it was created by artificial intelligence. The subtext there is that he was faking it, cheating. But what was the reality? Bass had spent over $23,000 of his own money on a professional subscription to LexisNexis, the absolute gold standard research tool that the biggest law firms in the world use. His work wasn't AI. It was just too good. So good they couldn't believe a regular person did it. And then the attacks just got petty.
It's almost funny if it weren't so serious. The court complained that his brief used an unknown font that was difficult to read. The documented fact? Bass had a receipt showing he paid nearly $400 to buy and license the official Times New Roman font, which is the exact font required by the court's own rules. He was literally being punished for following their own rules to the letter.
So, after all of this, after being trapped by procedure, for having his meticulous work insulted, what was the final devastating price tag on Jeremy Boss's fight for his home?
The numbers are just staggering. Let's break it down. That 23 grand for the legal research the court dismissed as AI? Gone. The almost $400 for the font they called unknown? Gone. And then, to add insult to injury, he was ordered to pay over $9,000 of his opponent's legal fees. When you factor in the loss of his home equity, we're talking about a total financial wipeout of over $400,000.
And just to add one final crushing insult to injury, the Court of Appeals didn't just agree with the lower court, it punished him for daring to appeal, ordering him to pay even more of his opponent's legal fees. Why? For bringing a case it officially labeled, once and for all, as frivolous, the very same case that the opposing lawyer, the guy on the other side, had called logical and sound.
You know, a case like this leaves you with a really uncomfortable question. When the court's own rules become a trap, when hard evidence gets ignored in favor of procedure, and when a citizen fighting for his home gets punished for doing his homework too well, you have to ask, what is the point of the justice system? Is the goal to find the truth, or is it just about enforcing the rules, no matter who gets hurt in the process?